Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thanks for checking it out if you're new. Previously, I have covered the first 3 episodes of HBO's The Last of Us and how I feel those were a perfect adaptation of the existing storyline from the games. Today, we're back to cover the middle chapter of the show, episodes 4 through 7. Did it hold up? Did the show collapse into a cesspit of bad writing and plot holes? Let's find out as we explore whether HBO's The Last of Us is still how you make an adaptation. Editor's note, I know I said I would cover this show in sets of 3, but then the Book of Boba Fett video took up a lot more time than expected. Please go watch that. Either way, I think it worked out as we essentially have 2 sets of 2-parter episodes here, with episodes 4 and 5 flowing into one another and 6 and 7 going pretty well together. Episode 4 opens with Ellie and Joel as they stop at a gas station on their journey west to find Joel's brother Tommy. Seeing Joel siphon gas is a nice touch for the show. While it might not be a big deal to some viewers, it just eliminates the nitpickers who would ask those kinds of questions on a show like this. I mean, who's mowing the lawn in The Walking Dead, am I right? While Joel is siphoning gas, Ellie plays around with the gun she stole from Bill and Frank's last episode. I think this is a really interesting idea to play around with here, as the video game counterpart to Ellie is much more timid and innocent. She claims to have never fired a weapon before an event that happens in the game. Meanwhile, HBO Ellie is dying to shoot something, or so she thinks. That being said, Ellie hasn't lost her sense of humor in this adaptation, busting out her iconic joke book, much to Joel's disdain. I mean, the look on Pedro's face right here says it all. We also get a faithful recreation of the magazine scene mentioned in the previous episode.
It's, light on the reading, but it has some interesting pictures.
Oh, no. Put that back. That's not for kids.
How do you even walk around with that thing?
Please get rid of it.
Hold your horses. I want to see what all the fuss is about. Why are all these pages stuck together?
We get a couple original scenes of the two as they travel across the country. One I really like is this scene of Joel trying to reassure Ellie they'll be safe out in the woods, but then staying up all night to keep watch. This is a clear and easy way to show the audience that Joel is either paranoid or sheltering Ellie from the true dangers. Along the way, they come across a blocked tunnel in Kansas City and are forced to enter the city's streets. In the game, this is Pittsburgh, but the show creatives chose to make Ellie and Joel's journey a little longer, making it feel like they've made more progress than the game. I like this change as it does give them more time on the road with a 22-hour journey versus the 9-hour trip to Pittsburgh. Once on the city streets, the two are ambushed by raiders and forced off the road. While this happens in the game, the remainder of the episode is a pretty big difference. Joel and Ellie are pinned down in a building with no apparent escape. Joel gets overwhelmed and Ellie is forced to use that gun she was so excited about earlier. In the game, this doesn't happen. Instead, Joel goes all Rambo on the raiders and later shows Ellie how to use a rifle if needed. This change supports what I said last time about this version of Ellie being a bit darker than her video game counterpart. That being said, this experience clearly still bothers her as a 14-year-old forced to take a life. An entirely original idea that's introduced here is Kathleen, the leader of these raiders. We learn that these raiders, or resistance fighters, whatever you want to call them, took over the Kansas City QZ after they finally had enough of Fedra's fascism. I think this addition is interesting as it gives face to these raiders or resistance. In the game, they're simply video game antagonists that want to kill Joel and Ellie because video game antagonists bad. We also learn that Kathleen is looking for someone named Henry, a name video game players may recognize. More on that next episode. Ellie and Joel make their way across the city where Ellie lets Joel know that the man from the beginning of the episode wasn't her first kill. Joel's apology here is so genuine and real with how awkward and sad he makes it. He definitely doesn't feel like this 14-year-old girl should have a body count. At the same time, Kathleen and her forces are searching the city for the two and come across another original idea, a sinkhole that appears to be filled with infected. The episode closes with Joel and Ellie taking refuge in a skyscraper penthouse where the show puts a lot of focus on how this version of Joel is older and maybe not as capable as the game version. Fun fact, when I watched this episode for the first time, my HBO glitched or something, and this sequence looked like this. For at least a solid minute, I had just accepted that the creators were going with the terrible, hyper-realistic night shooting that we keep getting in modern movies and TV. Something I found really interesting in all these conversations about Joel's age is that Ellie points out he's going deaf in one ear. Now, if you've played the games, you know Joel's hearing is actually really good. It's how the game works in its own version of the Arkham Detective Vision, where you can see through walls for stealth segments of the game. Removing this advantage of Joel raises the stakes, removing that sense of security for him, as evidenced by Sam and Henry's ability to sneak up on him at the end of the episode. So yeah, episode 4 is interesting. I didn't love it as much as episode 3, but it was still a nice addition. The changes they made, I feel, are still for the improvement of this version of the story and had me interested for the next half of the story, and episode 5 opens with a flashback to how Kathleen's resistance took over the control of the QZ. This is haunting, as we know Fedra is bad, but this doesn't seem much better. This revolution is of pure anger and hatred. Murder and other crimes occurring in the streets makes you question who the bad guys really are. During this flashback, we are also introduced to the two brothers, Sam and Henry, who are hiding from Kathleen. A major change in the game here is that Sam is deaf to match his actor. I really like this change as it gives an opportunity for representation in a story like this for the deaf community. We see the events of episode 4 from Sam and Henry's POV before meeting back up with Joel and Ellie. The two groups bond over their mutual desire to get out of the city and begin to form an escape plan. The dynamics of this group are really interesting, as Ellie and Sam are opposites in that Sam is very innocent while Ellie is aware of the horrors of this world. However, they're both still kids who see the light and levity in the worst of situations. Meanwhile, Joel and Henry know how bad things really are and don't have much hope for the world. It's revealed that Henry betrayed Kathleen's brother and turned him into Fedra for chemo treatments for Sam. While Joel hates Fedra and immediately becomes confrontational to Henry after learning that he's a rat, he can understand the need to protect a child, as he does with Ellie. During their escape, the group finds themselves pinned down by Kathleen's forces, with Joel separated from the other three. They have the three dead to rights and surrounded. Henry attempts to negotiate for Ellie and Sam's lives, but Kathleen is too much of a monster. The line, "Well, kids die, Henry," is so insane. But honestly, it's so nice to see such an evil villain instead of another redeemable or misunderstood villain like we get so often today. Thankfully, the group are saved by that sinkhole plotline introduced last episode. You see, Fedra drove all the Kansas City infected underground, and they've just slowly been making their way back to the surface. This action sequence is chaotic and interesting for so many little moments we get. We get a bloater, a massive, pretty much bulletproof mutation of the infected that tears through Kathleen's forces with some signature moves from the game. It's pretty cool to see, and the bloater itself is pretty much a fully practical effect with some CGI touch-ups. Joel is forced to protect the group from his sniper's perch, just as he does in the game, while Ellie, Sam, and Henry take cover from the infected. Here, Ellie meets one of the show's most terrifying infected, a child clicker. This infected really shakes the viewer to the core, further reinforcing that no one is safe in this world. It's also interesting to see the show go this far, as most video games or show won't go that far as to show an undead child. The group escapes as Kathleen is poetically taken out by this infected child. In the closing moments of the episode, the group takes refuge in an abandoned motel. It's here that Henry decides he and Sam will join Joel and Ellie out west. The two pairs could really use one another, with Joel providing protection for them, all while Sam gives Ellie a companion closer to her age. Unfortunately, Sam reveals that he was bit during all the chaos. Revealing his bite is a change from the game that I welcome fully because of what comes next. Ellie, knowing she is immune, attempts to cure Sam with her blood, promising to stay up all night with him to see if it works. This moment shows Ellie's hopefulness and also gives her a sense of heroism. She's not someone being dragged across the country to be forced into making a cure. She wants this. She wants to be the cure that can fix the world and save her friends. Unfortunately, she falls asleep, and when she wakes up, it didn't work, and Henry is forced to put his brother down and then himself. The moment not only breaks Ellie's spirits and makes her feel like a failure, but the audience too. I really liked episode 5. Similar to episode 4, this is a lot of original content that further expands the world and creates more heartbreak and suspense. If I did have one complaint though, it's that Sam and Henry were in the game for a bit longer than just this one episode. So it would have been nice to have them around for an episode or two more. but I understand why they had to do it. This leaves Joel and Ellie in a terrible place for episode 6 starts with a time skip of 3 months, where we see the stress of the journey and his aging catching up to Joel. At one point, Joel ends up passing out while on watch, leaving Ellie to take charge. Thankfully, the two come across the civilization in Jackson that Tommy has been living with. This scene is where the two brothers reunite, and it's so well acted by Pedro and Gabriel. We get an event that was never shown to us in the first game, but told to us in the second, that I won't give too many details about now. Ellie and Joel see how well off Tommy and his commune are, and I can't help but feel like Joel may be a little jealous here. I mean, the city of Jackson is ideally what Joel and Ellie are working towards, making everyone safe and civilized like this. I myself would probably find it hard to want to leave this place after seeing what the rest of the world is like. Though Ellie probably wouldn't want me to stop, seeing as she feels the need to save humanity. Joel and Ellie split up while they check out the town and catch up on things. Ellie sees the life she could have, growing up in the safety of the commune, while Joel expresses his grievances with Tommy. At the end of it all, Joel ends up begging Tommy to take Ellie, seeing as he doesn't feel he can with his age and the panic attacks he's been having. He doesn't want to fail another little girl like he did his daughter or Tess. He also desires for Tommy's kid to grow up in a better world, which Ellie could create. A version of this conversation happens in the game, though it's a lot angrier, while this one is more tearful, with Joel begging Tommy to take her. I really like this whole segment of the episode, as in the game it's briefly touched on and we don't see much of Jackson at all. Joel's visions of what could have been with Sarah also are a really neat touch to show how he's feeling about all this. Ellie overheard this conversation and expresses her own feelings, saying she's never felt safe with anyone but Joel. Though she crosses the line for Joel when she brings up that she can protect herself unlike Sarah. As a viewer, this scene is so hard to watch because you know it's two people who care for each other very much but can't express it because of the world they live in. Not wanting to say goodbye to his second chance at a daughter, Joel decides to stick with Ellie in the morning, and the two journey west to the college campus where they believe the Fireflies are stationed. Unfortunately, they find no one there but raiders. I think it's interesting how short this scene is, as it's a big, long, elaborate platforming and searching segment in the game that's honestly pretty boring. Now, obviously that's because a game needs gameplay mechanics, it needs to give you something to do, versus the show does not. For me, the short and to the point approach from the show is the better of the two. The episode ends with Joel getting stabbed by one of the raiders, a welcome change from the game in my opinion. In the game, Joel falls off a second-story ledge onto a piece of rebar in a big fight sequence, which can be a bit of a stretch for the whole survivability odds of it all, plus I don't think it would fit well with the grounded nature of the show. I think the stabbing is believable and enough of a cliffhanger to leave us on. This episode was honestly one of my favorites. You know, it's not really anything too crazy. It kept a lot of the moments from the game while changing them to fit better to the format of the show. I like that Tommy and Joel have some beef between them, but overall are happy to see one another. Seeing everything in Jackson and what it has to offer is a great reminder for the characters and audience what the show's really about. It's about how the last of us managed to survive and find new meaning in this cruel world. The speed run through the whole college campus events was nice, and Joel's stabbing leaves Ellie in quite the place for it. Episode 7 opens with Ellie trying to save Joel's life after his stabbing last episode. Joel tries to send her off to Tommy, knowing he will probably die doing so. I'm sure Joel is both trying to protect Ellie while also not wanting her to watch him die like he has with so many. As Ellie starts to leave, we flash back to Ellie in the Fedra Academy as the little troublemaker we know she is. I should say now that none of the contents of this episode are in the original game. Instead, they are from the game's only DLC content, Left Behind. I really like the fact that they include this content here, as it does take place here in the game's continuity, it just wasn't included in the original packaging. Ellie meets up with her former cadet turned Firefly, Riley. The two sneak out and head to an abandoned mall on the outskirts of QZ. It's here that we get to see the childhood that both of these girls were robbed of. Something as simple as the lights illuminating the hallways brings a smile to Ellie's face. Similar to how she is fascinated by the airplane in episode 3, the viewer is also reminded of the fact that Ellie's a child of the apocalypse, with her treating the escalators like an amusement park ride. I also found it interesting and funny when Ellie and Riley start to discuss that the looters only stole what they wanted, not necessarily what they needed. It does stop to make you think what would be the first thing on your mind if shit hits the fan. Are you grabbing the PS5 or your toothbrush? Overall, this episode is a moment of levity in the dark chapter of this story. These two girls have the night of their lives and catch feelings for one another. It's really nice to see this young LGBT romance, just as we saw Bill and Frank back in episode 3. While those two were a story of two older men coming to terms with their emotions in life, these two are still learning how they feel about one another and have their lives ahead of them. Their time together is also an almost shot-for-shot recreation of the game, with some minor changes that don't really matter. Unfortunately, it seems their romance may be doomed as Riley's being shipped out in the morning, wanting to spend her last night in Boston with the girl she loves. The two make up in a Halloween store, and the power of love overcomes, with Riley agreeing to stay with Ellie. However, this moment is interrupted by an infected that was awakened by the noise that they made. In the game, it is an entire horde, while here it's just one. The two girls manage to overpower it, but not without being bit in the process. I think it being just one infected works better than a horde, as it gives the girls and viewers some kind of hope that they can win. Sadly, they don't, and both girls come to grips with their stolen future. They choose to spend their last night alive together, which we the viewers know doesn't happen. While Riley may have turned, Ellie didn't, and she was forced to live on with that grief and guilt. This is not the tale of two people who grew old together like Bill and Frank, but instead a tragedy disguised as romance. It is because of this tragedy that Ellie returns to Joel in present day, refusing to fail to save another person she cares about. Overall, I really like this episode. As I said before, I'm glad they included it here instead of somewhere else or in season 2. This levity in the story is needed, in my opinion, with what is to come next in the final 2 episodes. The two actresses, Bella Ramsey and Storm Reed, also really sell the mixed bags of emotions in this episode as they go from excitement to heartbreak to anger to sadness all over the board. They carry this episode when the lead of the show, Pedro Pascal, is absent. Their tragic tale of young heartbreak is again that reminder of what this show is about, choosing to go on for the ones that we have loved and lost. So those, my friends, are the middle chapters of HBO's The Last of Us. It truly is one of the best adaptations I've ever seen. The show has followed the same general story of the game, while taking advantage of the opportunities to improve where the game was limited and the change of the medium. I really like the creatives have taken the opportunity to improve where the previous story may have lacked. It would have been so easy for them to feel their story is already perfect and not change a thing. But they did it anyways. And that is why HBO's The Last of Us is how you make an adaptation. Thank you so much for watching this exploration into episodes 4 through 7 of HBO's The Last of Us with me. I look forward to covering the final 2 episodes after the season finishes. Let me know what you think of the show in the comments down below. If you liked what you saw here and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.